Hi everyone, my name is Renee, Program Officer with EcoSchools Canada. On behalf of EcoSchools, thank you for viewing this webinar as part of the 2023 EcoSummit. I'm pleased to introduce Emily, Program Coordinator with EcoSchools Canada, to present this webinar, Sustainable Transportation, Learning and Action. Be sure to check out the accompanying worksheets for this webinar, which can be found linked in the description below and in the presentation schedule at ecoschools.ca/EcoSummit. We would also like to acknowledge that the EcoSummit has been made possible with support from Natural Resources Canada. We're glad to have you join us for this presentation, and now I'll pass it over to Emily.
Thank you very much, Renee. Just going to share my screen. Alrighty. Well, hi everyone, and welcome to the Sustainable Transportation Learning and Action webinar. In this webinar, we're going to explore the many ways that students and staff at your school can learn about, promote, and engage in sustainable modes of transportation. We're happy to welcome you here today, and we look forward to sharing ideas and resources to get you thinking about and taking action on this important topic. So here's our agenda for today. After welcoming you to the webinar, we will do a little bit to ground ourselves in why we're talking about sustainable transportation and how it's relevant to student learning. We'll then introduce the actions and resources the EcoSchools program that relate to sustainable transportation and low carbon commuting, and provide some tips and ideas for engaging in these actions at your school. We will then spend a little extra time introducing and reviewing the resources and curriculum connections for our latest sustainable transportation action, the zero-emissions vehicles and low-carbon driving. We're also excited to show you how completing these actions can help you earn your low-carbon commuting badge. We'll finish off by going over how to connect this work to your EcoSchool certification, and we'll let you know about the next steps. Before we start talking about sustainable transportation, take a moment to reflect on this question. What percentage of Canada's greenhouse gas emissions do you think transportation is responsible for? Feel free to pause here and share if you're watching this in a group, or to toss your guess below in a comment. Curious about the answer? Well, you're going to find it out soon. So why are we exploring sustainable transportation? Why is this a relevant and important topic? Well, in a world that's experiencing climate change, it's important to look at the various contributing factors. Transportation is responsible for approximately 25% of Canada's total greenhouse gas emissions. There's now an understanding that greenhouse gases are having a negative impact on our environment and are directly contributing to the climate change. The fact that transportation is such a large factor in these greenhouse gases in Canada makes it a clear topic to engage in as students and educators. In this webinar, we'll be focusing on a variety of options for low carbon commuting. After all, cars and small trucks account for almost 50% of these total emissions. We're now going to talk about the many sustainable transportation resources that are offered through the EcoSchools program, and how they can support your school as you explore this topic and take action to reduce your carbon footprint. For each action, I will give you a little overview of how you can get started, and then some tips and tricks and considerations. We would also like to acknowledge that opportunities for engaging in sustainable and active transportation vary greatly depending on factors such as the location of your school. For example, if your school is in a rural area, you may not have the option to bike or walk to school. So we'll be talking about lots of different options for engagements and learning. The actions we will discuss today are part of the EcoSchools suggested plan pathway, focused on low carbon commuting. These are the actions offered through our program that focus on sustainable transportation. Your school might choose to focus on some or all of these actions if you want to take steps towards reducing the environmental impact of commuting at your school. Today, we're going to start by introducing the Track School Transportation's Emissions Action. This action focuses on tracking how staff and students travel to and from the school to better understand transportation-related greenhouse gas emissions, and prompts students, staff, and families to consider the environmental impacts of their regular modes of transportation. This action can be led by an eco team or conducted as a classroom-based project. It's an excellent yearly action to provide insight into your school's transportation-related greenhouse gas emissions. Did you know that a 2021 study that sampled 552 schools in Canada found that, on average, 54% of students use active school transportation? You can use this action to determine how many students at your school use active school transportation. How do we get started with this action? Well, this action is a great first step in your sustainable transportation journey, as it allows you to create a baseline for your school and assess the impact of other actions you choose to bring into your school. EcoSchools has developed a Track School Transportation Emissions Survey Kit to assess with this action. Using this survey kit, students can find out how students and staff are currently traveling to and from school. The kit walks students through all the steps of conducting a school-wide survey, including calculating total, proportions, and averages. Once you're aware of your school's emissions, it's time to start brainstorming to increase sustainable actions. I'm going to share other actions that your school might choose to implement in a moment. We recommend students survey their school, again, to assess their impact. Your school may want to make this action part of their annual practice, or your school may want to make this part of your annual practice and to track school transportation over time. The data that's collected from this action is helping us calculate your school's transportation carbon emissions in collaborations with our partners ARC Sapporo. After completing this action, you can view these metrics on the impact page of your ECA account. A few tips and considerations for this action. Surveying your entire school can be a challenge. Use the Track School Transportation's Emissions Survey Kit for guidance, but do what works for your school. For example, consider creating an online survey and then perform the final calculations using page 7 of the survey kit. Next, this action is a great starting point for exploring sustainable transportation. You may choose to have deeper conversations around sustainable transportation, such as what geographic or socioeconomic considerations impact different communities' access to different modes of transportation? Or maybe how can municipal planning play a role in improving access to sustainable transportation? There's a lot of things here you can use to reflect on and to have these kind of deep conversations in your classroom. We can't wait to see just how your school brings the Track School Transportation Emissions action to life. The next action we're going to be talking about today is the Active and Sustainable School Travel Action, where students run a campaign to encourage low carbon transportation options, such as walking, cycling, busing, or carpooling to school. Increasing commitment to active and sustainable modes of transportation helps to reduce the number of vehicles on the road and the greenhouse gas emissions in the air. Supporting active and sustainable school travel leads to improved physical and mental health, a healthier environment, and safer streets. To increase the number of students and adults choosing to be active or sustainable with their travel options, you might choose to lead a one-day event, like a winter walk day, a campaign, like a bike to school week, or even establish a practice, like walking to school Wednesdays. So how do you get started with this kind of action? Well, your first step in this action is determining which low carbon transportation option is right for your school. You may want to focus on active transportation, like walking and biking, or you may want to focus on sustainable transportation, like public transit and busing. If you're planning an active transportation campaign, the walking and biking, the student population should live within walking distance of the school. We recommend within 3 kilometers, and have walking or biking routes in the school neighborhood that are suitable for all students to use safely. If this is not the case for your school, try focusing on sustainable transportation options, like carpooling, taking the school bus, or public transit. While these modes of transportation still emit greenhouse gases, the technology for zero-emission vehicles is becoming more advanced. And we're going to talk about that in more detail a little bit later. If you are planning an active transportation campaign, it's also important that you create maps for safe walking, biking, and wheeling routes to your school. If you're planning the sustainable transportation campaign, you should be providing students with information about safety and how the transit system works. Raise awareness of your event well in advance through posters, school announcements, and using your school's social media. It's worth noting that it's you might want to encourage greater participation in your event. So you can think about distributing these active and sustainable school travel pledge templates. Once completed, you can post them in high traffic areas of your school. So like on this page here, you can see a couple examples of what those look like. Students can sign their names and their goals, and you can post them around the school. On the next page, you can see a pretty creative poster that one of the schools have made in the past. So here's some tips and considerations on going with this action. You might want to think about how you're going to gather support and actively engage parents and other community member partners, such as public health nurses, police officers, municipal representatives, school board and district contracts, the regional transit authorities, and/or local environmental groups. You're going to want these people involved in the early stages of planning your action. They can provide advice and guidance on making your event safe and enjoyable. And they may also be keen to share resources to help you out with your events. We also recommend that you talk to your administrator and/or school board district to establish a safety protocol for your active and sustainable school travel action, and clearly communicate these along with the campaign expectations to parents and guardians at least 3 months ahead of your event. Finally, consider timing your event to mark the seasonal changes by participating in events such as an International Walk to School Day in October, the Winter Walk Day in February, or the Bike to School Week that happens in May. We can't wait to see how your schools bring alive the active and sustainable school travel action. The third action I'll be talking about today is the anti-idling action. I'm just gonna need 1 second. The anti-idling action. In this action, students track how many vehicles are idling on a normal day of school. It helps with breathing clean air and reducing the air pollution by tackling vehicle idling at your school and in your community. Idling is the act of letting a vehicle's engine run while it is parked. Idling can be a big problem in schools and often occurs when students are picked up at the end of the day. Letting cars idle wastes money and fuel, and it produces greenhouse gas emissions that contribute to climate change. This action will explore the negative effects of idling on the environment and human health, and encourage everyone to turn off their engines while parked by observing idling at This action will explore negative effects of idling on the environment and human health, and encourage everyone to turn off their engines while parked by observing idling at the school and implementing an anti-idling campaign. Many municipalities have anti-idling bylaws, which may be a helpful resource when implementing this action. How do you get started with this action? Well, this action guide will guide you through the steps to determine how many vehicles are idling on a normal day of school. And then based on your calculations, you can determine the annual kilograms of greenhouse gas emissions released by idling cars at your school. As shown on the screen, we've created an anti-idling tracking sheet for guidance on how to collect this data. You're also going to want to decide how to engage your school in learning about the negative effects of idling and how to encourage drivers to turn off their engines when parked. Consider working with your parent council to ensure that your messaging is relevant to your parent community. It's important that you track your impact by observing how many vehicles are idling after you launch your anti-idling action, and then you can compare the results to before you launched your action. Finally, as this action progresses, make sure that you update the school community on your successes. A couple tips and considerations for this action. One is to talk to your administrator about engaging the parent community before launching this action. It's also important that you establish clear safety protocols when students are outside tracking and engaging with idling cars. Things like a buddy system or maybe wearing reflective vests. Consider collecting data at various times throughout the school year to track seasonal trends. This will also enable you to better target your communications and to see the impact of your anti-idling action throughout the entire year. Finally, with permission from school administration, incentivize anti-idling by offering treats like hot chocolate, on a cold day, or maybe popsicles on a warm day, to drivers who had their engines turned off. We're excited to see how schools choose to bring anti-idling action into their communities. The last action I'm going to be talking to you about today is the zero-emission vehicles and low-carbon driving action. As this is our newest action, and it's accompanied by 4 resource guides and 3 activity guides, I'm going to be spending a little bit more time talking about it and doing an overview of this action. So this action allows students to explore how zero-emission vehicles and low-carbon driving can contribute to a more sustainable future. Well, why should we explore zero-emission vehicles and low-carbon driving? So in Canada, we heavily rely on vehicles for transportation. In fact, we have about 30 million people in Canada and 26 million registered vehicles. Did you know that a vehicle produces about 2.3 kilograms of CO2 for every liter of gasoline that it burns? This CO2 contributes to our greenhouse gas emissions. I think this illustration that you see here on your screen, which you'll find in one of our accompanying resources, really highlights the potential impacts of zero-emission vehicles. It outlines the degree to which Canadian drivers can reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by driving a zero-emission vehicle instead of an internal combustion engine vehicle. When we see the potential impacts of zero-emission vehicles, it starts to become clear that it's an important innovation for us to begin to discuss. You may want to pause here and look at your province or territory and see what the impact might be. While zero-emission vehicles are clearly an important innovation, it may be less clear what students, especially non-driving students, gain from exploring this topic. Here we've highlighted some areas of interest for students. By participating in this action, students will investigate the environmental impacts of driving, increase their understanding of zero-emission vehicles, bring awareness to sustainable consumption. This directly relates to the Sustainable Development Goal number 12. They will explore the design process to inspire them to become future innovators. And finally, it'll allow them to practice following scientific protocols and drawing their own conclusions. Before we explore more of the resources to learn about the zero-emission vehicles and low-carbon driving, I'd like to point out the key resources that we've developed for this action. First, as I previously mentioned, we have resource guides. These guides summarize the information on the zero-emission vehicles and low-carbon driving. They offer simple illustrations to reinforce complex concepts and include interesting did-you-know facts along the way. Another key set of resources are the activity guides. These guides present you with activities that allow students to apply and deepen their understanding of the resource guides. Through the active reflection activities, various hands-on experiments, and even some real-world mathematics, students will develop a deeper understanding of zero-emission vehicles and their environmental impact. These booklets are accessible through both our website and the resource section of the Zero-Emission Vehicles and Low-Carbon Driving Action on the EcoSchools certification application. We'll explain this I'm going to explain at the end how you can add this to your certification application, as well as the different components of the action quite shortly. I would also like to take a minute to highlight some of the rich opportunities for connections to the curriculum that you'll have through doing this action. We have noted a few of them here, but this is not all of them. To start, this action has clear connections to the science. One, it allows students to investigate how zero-emission vehicles may help to mitigate the long-term impacts of human uses of energy and natural resources on society and the environment. Also, it allows students to follow scientific and safety protocols and to demonstrate and conduct experiments. It allows students, There are also cross-curricular links to mathematics, as students have the ability to practice arithmetic skills by planning a trip in a zero-emission vehicle. They can also get to calculate distances between various locations, electric range of the vehicle, and travel times. There's also a clear connection to civics, as students may choose to explore what policies are in place in their province or territory and encourage the use of zero-emission vehicles. What policies are in place to encourage the use of zero-emission vehicles and the industries, civil society, and organizations and governments that are involved. So this action is all about developing an understanding of zero-emission vehicles and low-carbon driving. EcoSchools Canada has created the variety of resources that I've just touched on. And if you want to follow along with me, you're welcome to do that by going to our website, just like you see here. You can click on campaigns, go down to low carbon commuting, and you can follow along with me. It is worth noting that none of these activities are required in your school's action. They're just simply resources that you may choose to develop your own unique action that works for your school and your school community. So I'm going to take a moment here to dig through the resources. First, we'll go through the resource guides, then we'll go through the activity guides. So again, you're welcome to follow along with me. You can use the website or the ECA, or you can just watch. So the first resource guide we have prepared is the Environmental Impacts of Driving Guide. This informative overview of transportation and renewable energy leads students through understanding transportation and greenhouse gas effect, exploring the connection to zero-emission vehicles, considering the role of renewable energy, and investigating clean energy projects, and Indigenous communities. The next resource guide we have prepared is the Zero Emissions Vehicle Guide. This informative guide leads students through the types of zero-emission vehicles, such as the battery electric vehicle, the plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, and the fuel cell electric vehicle. It also allows students to look at the benefits and opportunities of zero-emission vehicles. Next is the Charging Zero-Emission Vehicles Guide. This guide leads students through understanding what are lithium batteries and how do they work? What is electric vehicle charging and how does it work? The last resource guide is the Low Carbon Driving and Eco Driving Guide. This informative guide leads students through exploring what is low carbon and eco driving while providing fuel efficient tips. This is a great one for our older students or to be shared with our parent community. Now I'm going to go over some of our actual activity guides. So those previous four were the resources where you can learn about these things. These are how you can actually apply your knowledge. So activities that we can do. This first activity guide is called the Zero Emissions Vehicle 3-2-1 activity. In this activity, they're going to use the 3-2-1 method to investigate the resources that we just spoke of. We also provide you ideas to extend your learning and some adaptations that might be suitable for your classroom. The next activity guide, and this is a big one, is the GM Learning Lab. This resource will walk you through some fun and hands-on experiments to support your learning around zero-emission vehicles, electricity, and renewable energy. There's a lot of activities in this guide, including making a zinc and nickel battery, building a simple electric motor using a battery and a magnet, creating a functional windmill to demonstrate the power of wind energy, and exploring how cars could look in the future and the various stages of designing a car. Each activity includes its own curriculum connections, background information, materials, and procedures. The final activity walks us through the steps required to plan 2 different zero-emission vehicle trips. So your students will plan one trip around town using a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, and then a second trip around town using a battery electric vehicle. This one is very math heavy, so if you're looking for a math activity, this is the one for you. Don't forget that you can share your learning with your school community. You might also want to extend your learning by following along in our Extend the Learning prompts located in the section of the action card. Before I wrap up talking about this action, there's a couple little tips and considerations. One is affordability. So affordability is a significant barrier to zero-emission vehicle adoption and is an important consideration when approaching this action. For varying reasons, purchasing a zero-emissions vehicle is not a realistic option for many people. We recommend approaching this action with a curious mindset and to focus on education and awareness. Educators should also understand students' physical and cognitive needs or interests before engaging with this activity. This will help you track impact, facilitate equitable access, and scaffold learning. Consider conducting a pre-action survey to assess students' current attitudes or knowledge about zero-emission vehicles and low-carbon driving. Don't forget to share what you have learned about zero-emission vehicles and low-carbon driving with your school community. I now want to tell you about how participating in the actions I've now mentioned here today can lead to your school earning your low carbon commuting badge. So EcoSchools suggests a variety of pathway plans that might be right for your school. If your school is interested in the actions we discussed today, then this plan might be the one for you. So schools that complete at least 3 of these actions will receive a special low carbon commuting badge. As a reminder, if you connect multiple EcoSchools actions, just remember that your responses to the certification questions should demonstrate how each action is either distinct or an extension of other work, rather than just duplicating. So speaking of certification questions, I just want to finish off today's webinar by highlighting where you can find all of the information that we discussed today and how to add these actions to your plan, as well as where to fill out the questions that contribute to your EcoSchools certification. So if you're watching this webinar today, you may have already logged into your EcoSchools certification application this year and started your plan. That's your first step. And if you need any help starting with the program, please contact us at programs@ecoschools.ca. On this slide, you're going to see a screenshot from the ECA library. This is where you're going to add your actions to your plan. So there's a library, and here's the actions. So to add an action, such as the zero-emission vehicle and the low-carbon driving action, to your plan, you can use the search function to look for it. So here I've just typed in the word zero, and it's the only one that popped up. So once you've found the action that you're looking for, you can click this little plus button right here, and then it'll be added to your plan. You can always go back and edit your plan if you choose to remove it in the future. Once the action is in your plan, you can open it up and you're going to see the following areas of the action. So you've got up here, you have an about section, which gives an overview of the action and why it's important. Next to the about, you're going to see the curriculum section, where the broad curriculum connections have been made. There are additional curriculum connections and the There are additional curriculum connections, and the SDG section indicates which sustainable development goals and actions it connects to. And EcoSchools in Action, that last tab at the top, includes photos of how other schools have participated in this action. That's one of my favorite places to look at. It's so interesting to see how other schools have interpreted the actions. Finally, down here, or next down here, you have the action guide. This is where you're going to find the guidelines on how to complete this action, which includes much of what we talked about today. Below that, you have the resource section. So the resource section includes key materials that will support you in engaging with this action. These are key resources that we drew your attention to in the presentation today. And lastly, down here, you have your certification questions. So this is where you can enter information about how your school undertook this action. Based on the depth of the action, you can earn a variety of different points towards your certification level. We also want to highlight the action documentation section. So you're going to find this if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the certification questions. Examples of documentation that you can include are completed worksheets, photos of the action taking place, similar to some of the photos that you saw in this presentation, or planning documents. So to review how you can connect this to your EcoSchool certification, Here are some steps if you're interested in taking the action on sustainable transportation this school year. So you can create your action plan in the ECA. Remember that registering your school and creating a plan is not an obligation to certify. It simply gives you access to a wide variety of great resources to support your environmental learning action. Once you've created your plan, add any of the actions we talked about today to your plan. And of course, select any of the other EcoSchool actions that your school is undertaking this year. Once you have a plan, it's time to put that plan into action. So remember that you can reach out to programs@ecoschools.ca if you have any questions along the way. So this is just a reminder that social media is a great way to stay connected to EcoSchools. Twitter is our most dynamic channel, with many schools, boards, and general public involved. If you have a Twitter account, please consider following us and we will follow you back. Before we end today, I just want to thank you for watching this webinar. I hope you found it helpful. We'd also like to take some time to recognize that the Zero Emissions Vehicle and Low Carbon Driving Action was created with support from Natural Resources Canada. Thank you very much.